Welcome to BGP Expert Talks, diving deep into the world of alternative proteins with the brightest experts, delivering key insights for corporate decision makers. I'm Floor Buitelaar, Managing Partner at Brightking Partners, and this is our second BGP Expert Talk. And today I speak with Thomas Notch. Thomas is a leading strategic and technical biotechnology expert, bringing over 30 years of senior leadership experience in the biotech industry, such as at Novozymes, Bioinnovation Institute, and Astana Ventures. And he merges his extensive background with a passion for sustainable food solutions, and that is exactly why we're speaking today. Thomas, welcome.
Thank you very much, Floor.
Well, to kick off our expert talk immediately, Thomas, you come from a biotech background, so how would you describe alternative proteins, and what should our listeners consider as solutions that can be produced within this category?
As the expression indicates, we're looking for alternatives to something. Alternative proteins, we're looking for alternative proteins to something that we have already. And this is usually, in my mind, or my take on this, proteins obtained through animal farming or animal husbandry. The advantages we are looking for with the alternatives is that we are looking for more sustainable proteins, or we are looking for new proteins with unique functionalities compared to what we have in the market today. The sources from biotech could be plants, it could be cell culture, as well as fermentation processes. And the areas that are most often talked about for alternative proteins would be in the feed and food products and applications.
Yeah, and maybe to add from that, we indeed, as Brightking Partners, operate across all those elements that you just mentioned. And you now see a trend where alternative proteins is very well known as a term, and that people start to talk maybe of complementary proteins, or how we at BGP like to describe it, also sustainable food alternatives, where it's more than just proteins. We also need to think of supporting ingredients to create that new protein diet. Thomas, I'm curious for your vision on, do you think that alternative proteins would disrupt traditional industries? And if so, how and when would you see this materialize?
So, very clearly, Floor, sure. I hope we'll see a disruption. And I do also hope that we do not have to wait much longer. As I mentioned before, animal or many of the proteins that we use today are made from intensive farming, and we are exploiting our planet's resources with incredible speed, emitting huge amounts of greenhouse gases that drives climate change. So we need to change fast. And luckily, I would say that the technologies that I just spoke about and that you added to as well, there's a lot of opportunities for this to happen, and we are ready to scale industrially. Unfortunately, many of these alternatives are more expensive than the cheap animal-based proteins that we have today. And I think actually one of the issues are that the alternatives or the traditional proteins are priced too low if we include all the societal and environmental impacts that these have on our society or
luckily seeing their carbon tax you're based in Denmark, and seeing the carbon tax, of course, at the moment. Sorry to interrupt you in this other question, but
no. But that's one example of now we are, and we can discuss that later also in more detail. But I want to see politicians make clear targets for inclusion, or this transition into more sustainable food systems broadly. And carbon tax is one, because I think that is a mechanism to level the playing field. But back to the disruption, I think many of the solutions we have today are ready to go in now. And I think that we will see a gradual transformation as alternatives gets onto the learning curve. We scale that, we can actually target already now more niche applications where the price points are higher, the functionality are better, so that you can actually better compete with the traditional proteins. I think today it's a tall order for the alternative protein industry to compete, for instance, with whey protein, which is basically a side product from cheese manufacturing. So these very, very large protein and inexpensive protein streams are hard to compete with. But I see a gradual change and introduction as we scale and as we get to economy of scale and actually get onto that learning curve, and pricing gets more and more comparable to what we have today.
And if we then talk disruption, in which categories particularly do you think that we would see this most in practice?
I think dairy, meat, ingredients. You spoke about functional foods, high protein diets. I mean, those would be clearly to me the first segments where you see this coming in. I also have a dream of hybrid products. So you take plant-based proteins and you add functional proteins and maybe other components, like we all know the Impossible Burger, where we had the heme protein to give the meat flavor. I think if you look for some of these hybrid products that actually fulfill taste and texture for the consumer at a price point that is affordable and with a taste profile that is very, very attractive. Those are the segments where, and it's not revolution, but we need to get in and grow the industry. And I think that's luckily, I think this is happening as we speak, because many of the technologies are available. There is, as we spoke about just now, political pressure to change. I think also there's a willingness generally from the agricultural space and the food manufacturers to realize that what we're doing now is long-term very unsustainable, and we need to change. So I think I hope that everything is lining up for us to have a market-driven introduction, so it goes beyond just oh, this is fun to try for the first thing, and then the consumers go back to what they're used to, because we actually make something which is healthy, tasty, sustainable, and in balance with the society at large. But on where food, meat, dairy.
And there are traditional organizations going to listen into to this expert talk, and we also have those as clients, of course. Which opportunities do you see for the more traditional organizations being for a long time active in the markets that you just mentioned, as opportunities for them into this alt protein market?
So for companies who are traditionally in the meat and dairy space, I would reach out through partnerships and actually look at what is the product portfolio that you want to have for the future. Is it only, or is it still very, very traditionally based products? Are you also in product innovation and capturing new markets, capturing younger consumer space in the space? Then, and if you don't have technology capabilities in-house, I would think that reaching out, trying to map what is possible out there, trying to map what is there of innovation, what are there of technology companies, startups, or maybe even larger established protein companies, and form partnerships around development of new alternative products and shaping that future together. So that's one thing. If you specifically think about food companies and dairies, I mean, maybe they have side streams that can be upcycled by use of in fermentation processes or as feedstock for other processes, as ingredients to these new products. So I think it's about stepping a little back and taking a holistic view on what do I want to create in my company, where do I want to take this company, and how can I re-engineer what I'm doing with the help from the outside? I think there is You could argue also that this is too complicated and you shouldn't do it. I think it's also a very it's a dangerous proposition not to do anything because you don't understand it. Because as you again just said, there's a carbon tax in Denmark. I can tell you, Flora, I am almost at the age of retirement, but I have grown children. They have moved away from home. And when I visit them and open their refrigerators, it looks very different than my fridge when I was 30 years old. And I think that consumer preferences are changing. Regulatory pressure is changing. So I think that the incumbents in the value chain of food, they need to change. I mean, I'm not saying they're being taken over, but I would much pledge for collaboration and innovative collaborations around bringing new solutions, new sustainable and healthy, tasty solutions to the marketplace, so that we can actually service a growing consumer base, both in Europe, in North America, and in the rest of the world.
And Thomas, what are some of the most pressing challenges that you see at the moment?
In the industry, as we spoke about before, Flor, there are many solutions that are ready, but they're still slightly costly. So I think the first one challenge is, of course, to get to price parity. The second is to get scale. And then in, being a bankable industry, I think you need to get beyond this sort of like, technical and commercial risks, so that you get to a point where you are simply ready to replicate and grow fast. Those would be the sort of like 3 steps. And I mean, there are different ingredients into this. It includes, of course, technology development and commercial development, but also leveling the playing field compared to existing traditional proteins.
And we've had some conversations about this before. There are, of course, comparisons to other industries. What's your view on how we can achieve this bankability and this maturity and point of replication?
Yeah, maybe I have a little too high hopes for our politicians. But again, I mean, you mentioned initially that in Denmark we just introduced a carbon tax on agriculture, and that's at least one step in the right direction. Let's see how that actually works when it's implemented. But I would say that what I think is a very good way to do this is if we could get clear demands on targets for what do we want to achieve. So the EU set targets for greenhouse gas reductions, but they also set targets on, renewable energy. They set targets on electric cars. And why don't they set targets for inclusion of alternative proteins or decarbonization of the food value chain? Because that would really drive innovation, that would reduce commercial risk. And back again to we all want, new technology that are more provide more sustainable, healthy solutions to us. They have to be commercially attractive, both on the supplier and consumer side. But let me give you 2 examples on industries where political targets have driven development. One would be the sector for offshore wind farms or for solar panel farms. I mean, the demand on inclusion of renewables into the mix has driven innovation, has driven engineering. There have been offtake agreements. So today there's no commercial and technology risk in these, and they are basically just replicated. And that's to a point where it's pension funds that invest into this at the same risk return as it would be an infrastructure, any other infrastructure investment. Another example, and back again to why should the large current companies jump and be a part of development, would be introduction of electric cars in Europe. I mean, not even half a decade ago, many of the large car manufacturers were very slow in realizing that there is a very large need and demand, or request, you could say, from consumers to get alternatives to the fossil fuel car. But it started, there was some, again, help. Fossil fuel cars are banned in some cities, in some countries. Electric cars are tax exempt. But today, every single big car manufacturer has a line of electric cars, and that's the direction that is going. And I think if you had the same on proteins or food value change, I think we could see very, very rapid changes in our value chain and the offerings, both in the B2B environment to the consumers, and we could develop a better, healthier, more sustainable products for the benefit of all of us.
Absolutely. I mean, usually you see that government support and government statements enable the industry to move quicker, basically to accelerate this. And well, now back to what the private sector companies listening in to this B2B expert talk can do themselves. I'm going to ask you a true or false statement, Thomas. Curious to hear your view. In a nutshell, companies can wait with investing in alternative proteins. True or false, and why?
Floor, of course you can always wait. That's true. So I'm not sure it's the truth that you're looking for. But I mean, there's nobody forcing you to do it. But I think with what we have talked about in this conversation so far, is that I think that there are so many changes coming on. There's so many trends in society that you need to invest. And we also briefly spoke about if you don't have, for instance, capabilities within cell culture or fermentation as of now, reach out and make partnerships, or reach out and engage in the ecosystem of alternative proteins to learn what are the offerings out there, and then compare to what is it that you can do. So I think, while as you would also say that, yeah, of course you can wait, but long term it's a losing proposition. And I think really the opportunity that a company would gain by stepping in and at least investing time in understanding the space, and then decide where to drive their own development and what markets and products do they want to shape, that's a winning proposition.
Great. Thanks for those insights, Thomas. I'm sure we could talk for many more hours about the sector and the development required. And luckily, we can regularly do that on our projects at BGP with you as an expert as well. But for now, I want to thank you for sharing all these insights with us today. It was really a pleasure having you, and I'm sure the listeners will find this insightful. And meanwhile, stay tuned for our next expert talk for corporate decision makers in alternative proteins, or follow us on LinkedIn. Thomas, thank you.
Thank you for having me.